From the head of a countrywide scrumping organisation to a dog-driven drifter, Duke Laverne had experienced an unexpected shift in career when he found himself breaking into Apple cores in a delirious haze. Upon finding a tape of his music and sharing it to a wider audience, Paul McCartney gave Duke his first big break in the industry with his first single, Scrumpers Blues. With this, Duke's career began in earnest. But would he be able to hold on to his newfound prestige and power? He quickly set to re-recording his previous songs from memory, his 12 Dogs now officially established as his backup band. The newly crowned Duke and the Jacks introduced the world to K9X with pride, eager to follow up Scrumpers Blues with a full-length album. His vocals also underwent a marked shift, Duke dropping his Somerset accent when singing in favour of a more general, widely understood Londoner accent. Though he would use this accent in public interviews and press appearances, he would often slip back into his native accent when particularly angry. At McCartney's request, Duke also hired several human members for his band, drawing from a pool of little-known session musicians and choosing a bassist and a percussionist for his band, Brian May and Roger Taylor respectively. The band quickly set to work recording Duke's first album, consisting of previous songs, a rearrangement of Scrumpers Blues, and newly recorded material such as In the Pound, Clavicle, and the album's iconic single, Headface, the man with a head for a face. Duke's relationship with Apple cores, however, was quickly changing to one of suspicion and even outright paranoia at times. Still scarred by his fights against the Apple magnates, Duke soon came under the belief that puns were an original invention of Apple cores. He believed their wordplay may have held secret, backhanded messages to him that sought to undo or otherwise expose his history of scrumping. With support from Dog and a begrudging Brian May, the Jacks soldiered on, honing Duke's new sound with each song they recorded. Finally, after months of work, on the 9th of December 1980, Duke finished work on the Red Album, a bold and brash collection of sonically innovative music that exploded onto the European musical scene, before finally moving westward as America had its first exposure to Duke's work. The album was met with acclaim from critics and peers alike. John Lennon, still somewhat frigid with Apple cores, even sent a congratulatory message by fax to Duke, unable to do so in person due to his then ongoing self-defense trial in America after having beaten former President Jimmy Carter into a coma. The power and prestige quickly made its way to Duke's head. Relishing in the adoration from the industry, he took his band members, marched into Paul McCartney's office, and severed his contract with Apple cores.
So, tell me about it. You hear people always, you talk about this big encounter a lot, but no one really goes into detail about how Duke quit, did they?
He went down to the big Tesco and bought a book, 100 top 100 funniest puns, something like that. He thought Apple cores made puns, as in they invented the whole thing. And he took us all, and all his dogs, and he went to Paul's office and he slammed it down on the desk.
Were you happy to go along with this?
I didn't exactly have a choice. He had some sheepdogs in the Jacks at the time, and if I wasn't careful, they'd herd me into a broom closet because my hair looked like sheep's wool at the time.
Sorry to hear that.
He started asking Paul what all the puns meant, and Paul just had enough. So they got into this massive shouting match. Well, Paul was shouting, Duke started howling. Our contracts were torn up after that, and then we were on our own.
Now free from Apple cores, and with a wave of publicity, Duke quickly reached an experimental peak as he expanded the Jacks, incorporating several reject Wurzels he had still kept in contact with, alongside bass guitarist John Deacon, who Duke found after he had been accidentally herded into a broom closet. He began having open spats with the press on the subject of K9X, finding the press's description of his dogs as instruments offensive, instead professing that each and every dog was a proper vocalist in their own right. His most infamous feud began during this time period, when Duke obtained a copy of David Bowie's Diamond Dogs and listened to it. Duke found the album so inflammatory and so offensive to his beloved canines that he became single-mindedly focused on letting Bowie know of his displeasure. Tracking down Bowie's address, Duke recorded 40 tapes of pure K9X, howls and baying of every variety of dog present in his band, and mailed them to Bowie's house. Though he had been one of the many who praised Duke's K9X at first, Bowie was nonetheless angered by this harassment. In retaliation, he adopted the short-lived persona of Wally Pooch Stomper for a performance at the Hammersmith Apollo, which Duke attended, premiering a song that he had written exclusively for Duke.
Let's stomp! Put on your Nikes and stomp some dogs. Let's stomp to the howls that we bang as we take them out. Let's hunt a chihuahua.
Duke took Let's Stomp as a challenge from Bowie, and prepared to fire back with a single of his own. Wanting to prove his music could stand on its own 2 feet without K9X, Duke briefly stripped his band back to just his session musicians and recruited vocalist Farrokh Bulsara to provide backing vocals for him. The single never saw release, however, as Brian May, Roger Taylor, John Deacon, and Farrokh, having been dubbed Freddie by Duke, felt that their talents were being wasted in the Jacks when hearing their music back, sans K9X. The four left the band a few days after, with the newly crowned Freddie Mercury naming the band Queen, telling Rolling Stones later, "A queen is higher than a duke, darling, and I know a lot about queens." Duke, on the other hand, felt the Jacks would have much more room to grow with the foregone, and summarily replaced them with chihuahuas.
I do not respect Freddie Mercury. You may not know this, there is such thing as a archduke. That is a duke that is technically at the same level as a king. Or a queen. But they prefer the title archduke. So, technically, a queen isn't necessarily higher than a duke.
Does this have anything to do with
No, this has nothing to do with my justified self-defense incident concerning Mr. Mercury.
The development of his next album, Brown Sleet, would be a tumultuous, extended affair. Duke was in and out of the public eye, getting into odd spats with celebrities and his remaining band members, human or otherwise, for increasingly pettier reasons. A notable incident was a failed attempt at making up with David Bowie, who he met outside a McDonald's in 1981, offering to talk things over. Unfortunately, the two came to blows after disagreeing on who would get to eat the leftover fries in the bag. Bowie would later use this event as lyrical inspiration, taking Let's Stomp and reworking it into his seminal comeback hit, Let's Dance. The band shrank month by month, until by 1982, the Jacks consisted solely of Duke, 5 dogs, and a single reject Wurzel. Dog, the band's longest standing member next to Duke, had left in late 1981 following a pay dispute, living the rest of his life in the luxurious lap of Diana, Princess of Wales. By the time Brown Sleep finally released in 1982, Duke was emotionally, creatively, and mentally exhausted, but obligations from his record label forced him to do a promotional tour for the album. It was here that one of Duke's most infamous moments unfolded. While starting a show in Lisbon, Duke suddenly embarked on an unprompted, unhinged rant on cats.
I don't want you here, in the room, or in me country. This country's becoming a bloody cat party. Felines everywhere. Get the cats out. Get the cats out. Get the monkeys out. Britain for the dogs. Roar!
The rant quickly made the rounds across the media as a bootleg tape leaked to the press, further incensing Duke. Brown Sleet was not well received by the industry, with critics viewing it as an unsuccessful attempt at building on the Red Album's themes, and would have otherwise faded into obscurity if it wasn't for the legal battle surrounding it years later. Having withdrawn from the public sphere in 1982, Duke made a sudden reappearance in 1984, suing up-and-coming artist Prince, who had recently released the album Purple Rain. Duke alleged the entire album was plagiarised from Brown Sleet, pointing out the similarity in title, as well as what he saw as clear examples of stolen lyrics.
So you can't say much about the suit.
Ongoing, yeah, it's ongoing. I'm just gonna say though, and I can do this, my lawyer said I can put it on air. Prince lad, he's got a song in it, When Doves Cry, in it.
Oh yeah, it's got a lot of airplay in it.
Yeah, hang on, give me
What are you doing?
Give me a minute, give me a minute. Alright, here, look at this. Got my song here on this tape. They're identical, watch this.
It doesn't sound like When Doves Cry.
Yeah, the title does though, innit?
Thought you were saying the songs are identical.
Yeah, they are identical in the title. His is called When Doves Cry, mine's called When Dogs Cry.
The suit was dismissed with prejudice despite Duke's complaints, and the legal fees he had to pay resulted in him declaring bankruptcy not long after. Prince gave very few statements regarding the suit on his end, but his associates believe that winning the case gave him an emboldened, trigger-happy approach to sending out his own lawsuits. Taking the few scraps of money he had left, Duke left London for parts unknown. This was a new low for Duke, but as he struggled on into the 90s, the starving artist eventually began walking a path that would bring him back to the heights of prestige and power he'd had before, and it would only take a single apple to motivate him.
And if you say bark, I'll wallop